Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So behind me is this Free Burma protest here in London, United Kingdom. I say Burma, of course, Myanmar is the modern name, and there was a picnic in Green Park with other democracy campaign protesters from Myanmar, stroke Burma, calling for an end to the military dictatorship which has ruled the country certainly since the early 60s, arguably since just after independence. So they're carrying images of Aung San Suu Kyi, who was leader of the League for Democracy for a long time. So her father, Aung San Suu, was a independence leader and was assassinated just before independence in March 1948. Myanmar being an erstwhile British colony, as in where George Orwell was a policeman in the 1920s. So anyway, it's quite a control freak government. Got a very close relationship with the Chinese, who borders China. I thought they'd hurry up and come here, but the light's been red, and then they're keeping it red. I didn't want to film from such a distance. So they're chanting in decidedly accented English. Anyhow, because it's been open to tourism since the late 90s, but you can't just wander around freely. You had to go around with a guide who's a local English teacher, but really he's a government minder and not be causing any trouble. Famously, there was a British guy there in the 90s, in the late 90s, and he said something or did something which was calling for human rights in Burma, and he spent a few years cooling his heels in prison. He wrote a memoir entitled "The Heart Must Break," and he came back here, became a Conservative Party activist. So in the early 90s, John Major's Conservative government, he'd authorised weapons sales to Myanmar. Many people said it was unacceptable. It's 1988 the country officially changed its name to Myanmar. But anyway, Aung San Suu Kyi, she went to school, I think it was in India actually, Delhi, and latterly St Hugh's College, Oxford, as in it's all women's college of Oxford University. It's a mixed college now, St Hugh's. And then she graduated. She married an Oxford Don. Then they had 2 sons. She moved back to Burma, but she was under house arrest for years in the 80s and the 90s. Eventually, because her League for Democracy won the election, the military dictatorship allowed her to become prime minister. She's kind of ineffectual. There were large-scale protests in 2007. Hundreds of people were shot dead, mostly Buddhist monks. So the State Law and Order Restoration Council is the junta, and they've often been fighting the Karen and the Shan state. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. I'm reporting on your protest.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you
So here we have Spring Revolution here, 2021. Okay. Please use your voice to promote Burma's freedom against the coup d'etat, because they had some semblance of democracy, but then there appears to have been a putsch a few months ago, and it was captured more or less live. And look at their alternative flags. So they're saying it's a state terrorism, really, which is oppressing the Burmese people. They're holding aloft images of Aung San Suu Kyi, but some people see her as a patsy, that she's been really a sort of fig leaf for the autocratic system, and the Rohingya minority, this Muslim ethnic minority, have been mistreated. She was given the freedom of the city of Dublin in about 1990. That was rescinded some years ago. But anyway, so is she powerless? Is she a puppet in the hands of a regime? It's difficult to say. So it's got oil there, and it does a lot of trade with China, a fairly strategically important position. Now, India used to advocate for democracy in Myanmar. They don't do that anymore. They want to still maintain relations with the regime, not alienate them and drive them into the arms of Beijing. They're making a bit of noise. So there are not that many Myanmaris, not many of them allowed to come abroad. I mean, I remember 2008, that December was the very first time I met a Myanmarese person. And I know of a Myanmarese doctor who was working here, saying to someone I know who was a nurse in the same hospital, I think it's fantastic the way you're allowed to sit around and chat and discuss politics and openly castigate the government. You would never dare do that in Myanmar. There will be grave repercussions if you did that. The man said, if it wasn't for my wife back in Myanmar, I would stay here. So that's what it's like. So not many people talk English. The government likes to keep it that way. They don't want people having access to outside information, make it too easy to move abroad. Often they go and work in Thailand, which is their neighbouring country. They often fought wars against Siam, but there are a few economic opportunities. They say a lot of people live in semi-servitude in Myanmar, forced labour in various projects, and various generals who support the regime, they profit from these. It doesn't benefit the average person. Another thing I could point out is that they're marching up to Buckingham Palace. Now we are in St James's Park, as in a stone's throw from St James's Palace, which is the official residence of the House of Windsor. So so protests are not permitted in royal parks, although I do remember walking through to Hyde Park once, but I think, strictly speaking, that was going to a protest rather than the actual protest. So I'm surprised this is going on. That's why they have state visits here, because the police can legally shut down any protest, arrest people for chanting a slogan, displaying a banner or something like that. But then again, I suppose just because the police can do it doesn't mean they're obliged to do it. They can choose to let this drift. It's no harm. It's not a state visit they're trying to disrupt. There is no state visit right now. I mean, Myanmar's not going to get one because their government's reputation is so dreadful. But they've got a cordial relationship with Russia. So some top Russian security officials were over there recently, authorizing new arms sales, building a sort of anti-Western alliance, another dictatorship which they think is really helpful to them. It's contemptuous of the very notion of human rights. So yeah, that's it. The Karen and the Shan people are indigenous ethnic minorities living in northern Burma, these mountainous regions adjacent to China. And when the Japanese invaded, some of the Bamar people, that's the major ethnic group in Burma, they welcomed the Japanese and wanted to be part of the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, which was a code name for the Japanese Empire. But these ethnic minorities, they tended to be pro-British, and they fought gallantly against the Japanese occupation, which eventually was defeated. Well, because so Dr. Barma, he became the Prime Minister of Burma under Japanese superintendents. And a lot of people say it was a false independence. But then, look, Da police are here, but I don't think the Rosas are intervening. They're just monitoring the situation, see nothing untoward occurs. It doesn't look like it to me, not the least bit menacing. So it's a red road because it's a royal road, us being in a royal park. Well, and I should have pointed out, well, is back there, behind those trees, that is St James's Palace, which is actually fairly small. So it's not Buckingham Palace, contrary to popular misconception. I wonder what they're blowing all the whistles about. Anyway, so back to Myanmar. So they shifted the capital from Rangoon to, is it Nadipur, quite a few years ago. So some top UN officials and US Secretary of State have been there trying to build a dialogue, persuade the regime to reform, but a few significant concessions have been made to liberty in Myanmar. So I'm sorry to say that the long night of oppression looks like it's going to last indefinitely. There are really no rays of hope on the horizon there, as they're increasingly closely integrated with China. So talk about the Karen state and the Shan state trying to be independent in northern Myanmar, battling for independence, and the Myanmarese army has not been able to defeat them in decades. But apparently they've supported themselves by trading heroin. That's the Golden Triangle, and it's obviously been grown there for centuries, perhaps millennia, and how else are they going to make money? They've got no precious resources to fund their campaign. Anyway, so smuggled out, it's produced in other places, smuggled out via China. I'm not saying with the Chinese government's acquiescence, or Thailand and so on in India. And look over here, hands off our children. I think it's against compulsory vaccination of children in schools. Although I don't think we've gone for compulsory vaccination, but the possibility of it. All right, signing off here. Bye.